Here's how to play Ruthless Junctions. You have your tiles and you have your board. And the first thing you want to do is pull out the count tiles and give them to your players. More on that later. And then we're going to look at these other tiles. You can see that there's tiles with asterisks and tiles with links. This means links. This is a link tile. It has a skinny center, whereas the tiles that have asterisks are junction tiles. Put junction tiles on the black squares. So let's do that. And you're just grabbing them, putting them on the squares, and you don't think about how they're oriented. It's important that they be put down face down so that you don't know how the junctions will be oriented once you flip them over. And then when you flip them over, it's important that you do that in a way that doesn't change their orientation. You can flip them this way or this way, but the main thing is that they are oriented randomly. And then I like to place them nicely on the board. As you can see, there are junctions of 4 different colors: red, blue, purple, and green. And there's also a multicolored junction. There's 2 multicolored junctions in this game. Now we need to decide who is going to go first. So let's say we have 4 players. Each of them draws a junction. And then the player with the most edge connections, these 2 have the most edge connections, goes first. So now these 2 are out of the running, and these 2 players are going to draw again. And so this player is going to go first. But before we do that, we want to make sure everyone gets a link. And you grab a link and you place it face up. Okay, here we are, set to play the game. As you can see from the back of the box, the idea of the game is to connect junctions with your link. And if you can connect to a chain that has more tiles in it, you can get more points. So we're still at the beginning here, and we have this player to go first. And they're going to want to put this red link between a red and red junction, but there may not be any red or red junctions ready to be connected. So in order to get them ready, you have different actions you can take. There are 6 of them. One of them is you can rotate a tile 90 degrees. For instance, you can take this tile, and that is an action. And you can see now it's ready for this to be placed. Now, we always start with the counter at 0, and this is to help you keep track of how many actions you've taken, and also to let other people know how many actions you've taken. So that person has taken 1 action. So that's one kind of action, is rotating. But there's other things you could do. For instance, you can do a scramble swap. If there is a piece on the board that you don't like, you can remove it and discard it, put it in the discard pile, and grab another one. Now this is a bit of a gamble, and flip it and see what you get. Another kind of move is a buddy swap. You can basically take 2 tiles that are next to each other, either in the same column or row, and swap positions. So you can see in that case, we actually did line them up so that they can be connected with this tile. So let's just say that that was my first action, was doing this buddy swap. And then for my second action, I can place a link. This is a link move. You can place a link, that's an action. Now, if it just so happened that I didn't like this link for whatever reason, I could, as an action, discard it, grab another link, and then see what I could do with that. So that's another action. And then another action is to remove a link from the board, but more on that later. But let's just say that we use this. And now I've used two actions to make connections. So I've actually just made 3 points because I get a point for each tile in a chain. Now once I've played my link, I grab another link. I'm not allowed to play it on this turn, but it's good to think about what I might want to do with it on my next turn. But I have this one other action, and so a good idea is to look at what does the next player have for their link. Now with that blue link that the next player has, I can see that they have a lot of options. Another thing I can do is set up for my next turn. So I don't see anything that's purple to purple just yet, but I can use my third move to set this up. Now I've jumped ahead and player 2 has made these moves to set up these junctions and make this link. Now they need to grab their next link, place it face up, another blue to blue. And we're going to move on to the next player, which has some interesting opportunities. So, they could find a way to connect this green and red, but they're not going to get as many points for that as they could. If they can connect to this one here, they'll get more points. So how can they do that? Well, they can do a buddy swap. So that means move this one down here and move this one up here. So that they started with 0 moves, and then now they've made one move. A buddy swap is one move. And then for their second move, they can place that there. And now they've just gotten 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So connecting to an already existing chain is the way to get the most points. Now they've done 2 moves. They still have one more move. They've gotten another link. And now they're thinking about, well, what does the next player have? The next player has red to red. And they want to make sure that the next player doesn't just keep building on this chain. So they can predict that the next player might move this piece here and then place a piece there, and then they're going to get a bunch of points. So in order to stop them from doing that, they can remove this piece, but then this piece can go 1, 2, 3. So they're going to be able to make that connection. So this is where it becomes important to just remove links from the board. Now, they just placed this link, so they're not able to remove that link. That's a rule. You can't remove a link you just placed, but they can remove this link. So for their third move, they're going to discard this one. And what that means is the next player is not going to be able to get as many points as they could have if that chain had remained unbroken. So that's their third move. And now it's the next player's turn. So they are looking to see, how can they do this? Well, they can just put this piece here. There you go. And they just made 5 points. And they can do that with just one move. And now they have 2 more moves to try to think about, well, what's the next player got? The next player's got purple to purple. And there is a place right here where it's already set up for them to easily get purple to purple, but they're not too concerned about that because that's just 3 points. But they can see with this one over here, they can move that to there and then connect, and they're going to get all these points, 5 points. So they want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So for one of their moves, what they can do is say, I'm going to discard this, put it in the discard pile, and grab another one and hope it's not purple. All right, it's not purple. So that was 2 moves. And they have another move, so while they're at it, they can try to make this difficult for them because this is all set up. So they can remove this one and hope that they get another tile that's not purple. Ah, it's purple. You gamble, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So now we're at this player, and let's say that they don't like this purple because they think they can get more points if they gamble. So they can discard that. That's their first move. And then draw another link. Now they have a blue to red. Now they might think it's a good idea to just turn this one so that they can connect these 2 chains, but you are not allowed to do that. You are not allowed to rotate this or swap it when it's connected with a link. When it has a link connecting it to another junction, it's locked. So that's not something you can do. Now, they don't really need to do that because actually there's an opportunity right here for them. So they can put that there. And now they get these points, 1 for each tile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 points. And that was just 2 moves. Swapping the link and placing the link. So they have 1 more move after they set themselves up with the next tile. And you can see they got the wild link. We'll get to that soon, but basically the wild link lets you connect any colors of junctions to each other. So we're going to move on to the next player. But before we do that, they still have 1 more move. And what should they do with it? Well, they can see that there's a blue to blue. And they can see that this is set up for a blue to blue. Or there's other possibilities. But, they might just say, for my last move, just to make it more difficult for a person with a blue link, I will remove that one and grab another junction, and flip it. So there's now less opportunity for blue on the board. And that is their 3rd move. So the game has a designated scorekeeper, and they mark down the player's points as soon as they connect the junction. And for the first round, they just write down how many points they got. But starting with the second round, they write down how many points they got. So on the second round, Mark got 7 points. But you also write down the cumulative score. So 7 plus 3 is 10. And this helps you keep track of how people are doing because everyone is trying to get 50 points. So the first person to get 50 points is potentially the winner, provided that the round finishes and they're the one with the highest score. When we look at the rule book, we can see another example of scoring, and just that we have a 3 for Athena on the first round, but then she gets another 3 on the second round, so she has a total score of 6. And then on her third round, she gets 3, so she has a total score of 9. And then on her fourth round, she has a 7, which gives her a total score of 16. Now, let's say the board is in this state, and it's this player's turn. And they may think, how can I get some points by connecting to this giant chain? I know, I'll just remove this and then place my link in the same place. But actually, that is not allowed. You're not allowed to immediately replace a link with your own link. But you can do it if you remove the link and then manipulate one of the adjacent junctions to the empty space. So in this case, they can rotate that one 90 degrees. And then they can put this here. It's kind of a ninja move, and it ends up taking all 3 of the moves. I've been calling them moves, but they're really actions, and that's how I refer to them in the rule book, as actions, because they involve sometimes, like a buddy swap involves swapping 2 pieces, but that's really just one action. So yeah, this is an opportunity to make a lot of points if you see it, that you could replace the link with your link, but you have to be able to manipulate one of the adjacent junctions. Okay, let's say it's this player's turn now, and they want to do something with their green link. They would love to connect this green junction to this long chain. And this is another example of why it can be useful to use an action to remove a link. So they have 0 actions they've taken so far. The 0 is pointing towards them. For their first action, they can remove this and discard it. Now this had been locked, so they couldn't move that before. But now that it's unlocked, that's their first action. For their second action, they can turn that, rotate it 90 degrees. And then finally, for their third action, they can place that. So again, that's a great example of how to strategically remove a link to unlock a junction. Now, what they might have been paying attention to is that the next player has a wild link, and that can just connect anything to anything, provided that they're lined up correctly. So they're going to be able to jump in on all of this. And the way to prevent that is they could have used some of their actions to pull some of these links out of this giant chain so that they couldn't score as many points. And that's one of the challenges in this game, is you are trying to think of how can I get as many points as possible, but sometimes in doing so, you don't remember to prevent the next player from getting as many points as they can. So here we see the next player totally free to jump in here and get all these points. 1 point for every tile in this chain. Now, after they've placed their link, they need to draw another link. And in this case, they've drawn the Artemis tile. And Artemis is a rambunctious chaos kitty. And her goal is to try to just shake things up. So this has worked out very well for this player, because once that tile of Artemis is pulled, you actually pull all the links off the board and then continue play. Not the junctions, just the links. Now, this doesn't affect the last player's score because they received their score as soon as they connected the junctions. So now we have a board with no more links. They then discard that and draw another tile, and play can continue. Now, if we get to the point where this player wants to swap their link for another link, and they look over at the scramble, and there are no links anymore, well, that means it's time to take the discard pile and put it back into the scramble and mix it up and continue play. So as soon as you try to pull a type of tile from the scramble, either a junction or a link, and it doesn't have any more of that type, then you mix the discard stack back into the scramble. Okay, that's how you play Ruthless Junctions. And remember, once a player gets 50 points, that means that is the last round of the game. And then if they have the highest points at the end of the round, then they are the winner. But it's possible one of the other players will actually overtake them in that final round. So they could end up winning. And if you feel like you'd like to play longer, you can play up to 75 points or 100 points, but decide on that at the beginning. And remember, in this game, you have to be ruthless. You can't just think about how you're going to get points on your turn. You have to think about how other players are going to get points on their upcoming turns. And sometimes there's a player who's gotten into the lead, and the other players might form alliances to make sure that they do everything they can cooperatively to stop that player. And then once they do, they have to fight it out amongst themselves. So enjoy. May the most ruthless Wrangler of Junctions be victorious. Artemis the cat reminds you to outlink if you want to win Ruthless Junctions.